These guys are going to give their thoughts. Ghost of Tsushima. Sage Tim, take it away.
It's kind of an amazing game to look back at because this is 5 years old now. And it's something I've been saying, I think, for a good number of years is that I think the sort of shelf life of how much a video game ages over time, I think, is getting longer and longer. Like, you know, in 2010, a game that was 5 years old is the difference between God of War 1 and God of War 3, right? Massive leap in technology and what like how that is perceived as like a retro game. This is 5 years old, and I feel like it looks like it could have come out this year. Like, it's very much in this camp of, we'll see if that maintains true over a really long amount of time, but it's starting to feel like we get games like this that really feel timeless. I was like obsessed with this when this came out. I don't platinum a lot of games just because I don't always find the trophy part of the whole experience or the achievement part of it as interesting as just getting through like the story and engaging with the mechanics. But I like could not get enough of this. I squeezed out like every little ounce of this game that there was. And this is before they even had a multiplayer mode at all. But this just whole journey of Jin Sakai and the sort of conflict family, both of the foreign military of the Mongols, and then also the interpersonal conflict of his family and his uncle, the story of honor versus pragmatism. It's like it really kind of is hitting up there with, at least for me, some of the best of like samurai films and cinema that we've ever gotten. And I think that as time goes on, it really does go to show just how powerful the medium video games can be. When I feel like we're starting to really get these things that are like as good as some of the best films in the same genre.
Nice. And very cinematic. People talk about this game there, the Kurosawa mode you can have in this, which makes a return in Yote as well there. Yeah. Tim, what's your thoughts? Ghost of Tsushima there.
It's a game that I think everyone was hearing about in some capacity when it came out, and for good reason. Really took this approach of historical reverence, but while also being really creative with history in the mythical sense that it tends to take with the perspective of hundreds of years from these happenings. And it pays off in this game where you stop to write a haiku that is then put on a headband that you have that you can just, that is in your inventory. And it's a reminder of that little haiku you composed sitting at this fucking hot spring overlooking the cherry blossom fields. It takes place in the span of weeks, but the way the game is created or the environment is designed, you walk through the 4 seasons. You see the various ways the elements are interacting with these 4 seasons, as well as how these seasons impact the surrounding feel. Like the falling leaves tell a story, that kind of thing. You are surrounded with such a beautiful world that the bloodshed and horrors of war just sit in such stark contrast to it that you can't help but be transfixed by it. Because I found myself alternating between going after an objective, following this really intense story, and getting caught by the beauty of the bamboo grove I was walking through. And that's something that I've seen echoed in literature before from people who were in war. Like one of the things that Vietnam veterans talked about was just how wonderfully beautiful the forest was when it wasn't trying to kill you. And I think that's something that this game does wonderfully. You stop to smell the fucking roses. It really does do a good job of trying to layer upon you the different levels of art and culture relevant to the region, in such a way that, like, the island of Tsushima does have a statue commemorating the freaking game.
And some of the
Because
developers are official ambassadors to that island now.
yeah, and it really goes a ways towards showing that you are playing a game that's not just going to be a hodgepodge of cultural motifs. They really do try to pay reverence to the history of the topic that they're talking about, because it is a real conflict that happened. Not exactly as the game plays, because it is done through a very mythical lens. You're following this ghost that is supposed to be this one-man army that is born from his almost defeat at the hands of the Mongols and his perceived rebirth by those that had viewed him as dead. And also his own perceived rebirth as he finds himself questioning his views of honor and the Bushido Code, and how he is trying to respond to this tragedy befalling his nation around him while adhering to all of the most important notions that he'd been raised and trained upon. So it is a very beautiful game, not just aesthetically, but I think also narratively and also culturally. It
I think it excels in all those areas and weaves them together with a lot of skill. This is something that, like, the people making this, they did their research and then they did it 7 more times to make sure they knew what they were talking about. After this game came out, you actually saw a lot of Japanese, because this is not a Japanese studio. Sucker Punch, I believe, is based in the U.S. if I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong on that. Maybe it's European, but I'm pretty sure it was at least the kind of main head developers are American.
Yes, it is. It's
Okay, it
American.
is. A lot of Japanese developers were saying, like, after this game came out, like, wow, we're almost a little embarrassed. We've kind of haven't been telling game stories set in Japan or making games set in a Japanese setting. And there was a period kind of during the PS3 360 era, especially, like, you saw studios like Capcom, I think, do this a lot, where these old school Japanese video game studios were really going for a Western market and not so much a domestic market for their own country. And I think this game was like a big wake up call to, like, wow, there's so much rich stuff here. Why aren't we doing that? And now I think you're starting to see a lot more of those. Capcom's doing Onimusha again, like they brought that franchise back. And so I think this game, not only is an amazing game that is this incredible work of art. I mean, genuinely, you could pause this game almost anywhere and hang the image on a wall as a painting, and it would look perfectly in place in an art museum. But it also inspired kind of a whole industry, or a domestic country's industry, to look at their own cultural roots and reach back and go, like, why don't we do more stuff like this again? Like, let's go. And you're starting to see that come. Some of these games start to come out now. Like I say, Onimusha, that's just going to be next year. And so it gets like a big impact outside of even just itself.
Yeah. And this game initially came out on the PS4 there. Now it's been 5 years later. It's gotten an update and it's been on the PS5 now, and Windows, things like that.
It was sort of a swan song for the whole PlayStation 4 console.
Yeah, it came out towards the tail end of it. So it came out PlayStation 4 2020, July 1st, July 17th, I'm sorry, 2020 there.
And that was just a few months before the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X released. So it really kind of felt like this is the last hurrah, squeezing all the final amount of power we can out of the PS4 system. Like, here's Sony's last big exclusive for that generation.
Yeah. And did you guys? So now that it's been 5 years later, have you only played the base version of the game, or have you done the director's cut version of Ghost of
I've
Tsushima?
returned to it here and there over time. I haven't done like a full playthrough of the whole game, but I've gone back to it and just to explore and to play some of it and try out stuff like Kurosawa mode or play it like in the English version and the Japanese version, get a little bit of that experience. And the fact that there are so many ways you could kind of approach the game and replay it and get like a slightly different experience with it, I think speaks to just again how much effort went into the whole thing. And it holds up, man. It holds up, and I feel like it's just as good when it came out as now as it was when it came out. I really don't think there's been any great loss there. The combat system is fantastic. I love how it's about a much fewer number of careful, precise strikes that make the combat feel a little more realistic. Like, hey, somebody can only get hit with the sword 1, 2, 3 times at the most before they are going to be dead. And this game really feels like when you look at like a samurai film and you see those battles where it's more about the buildup of it, and then the fight, it happens in just a few seconds really. But the speed and sort of power of that feels so genuine to sort of real life warfare in a way. And yeah, certainly, of course, not 100%. There's gamified elements of it. You're not going to forget you're playing a video game necessarily, but it does manage to get closer than I think a lot of games do to that.
Okay. How do you guys feel about the combat? Tim, you mentioned that there a little bit of kind of the style of it, this kind of how it plays in warfare. And people also remarked about this game when it came out as well about how it's like, hey, Assassin's Creed, this is what we wanted from them to do a samurai kind of type game, and Sucker Punch beat them to the punch with Ghost of Tsushima. How you feel about that, Tim?
I think that
Ubisoft are idiots.
I think, well, you compare it to Assassin's Creed, and yeah, that is a pretty fair assessment, because Assassin's Creed, I would say, is one of the more action-oriented stealth games with a more robust combat system for the eventuality of getting caught. But this one definitely, you could play the entire game with no stealth mechanics, be really true to, and honorable out front about confronting each person face to face. You could play the entire thing through in stealth, save for a couple sequences. And ultimately, I really did like the combat. I found myself, given the chance, just murdering as many invaders as I could, just because you could really, with the combat system, have a nice flow going of hailing down arrows at a range, deflecting and parrying things, and just working your way through a field utilizing the environment, like explosive pots, or doing just enough subterfuge to get rid of the enemies by this one big guy. You really just, if you find yourself bored of any one approach to the game, it presents a reasonable alternative. And I think it's really, really worthwhile for that.
Yeah. How the boss battles? The boss battles, they pretty challenging. They're pretty good.
I love the boss battles in this game because that's where it really starts feeling like truly like a samurai film at its best, because there are these very kind of slow rhythmic duel sequences, and they always happen under these like the most gorgeous, like painting-esque environments in the game. They're honestly incredible. I don't know if I ever found them like especially challenging, but I've always found them interesting to engage with. Though I don't know if I ever thought it was like super hard either.
Okay. Is there a difficulty slider on here, or?
Yeah. There's I just played it on normal. There's definitely a hard. You could bump it up if you feel like it's a little too easy.
Okay. What level did you play it on, Tim?
I played it on the hardest difficulty I could, or that was available when you first started. And I really liked the challenge. I thought that if you really just want to breeze through the story, you can put it on an easier one, and that would work just fine. But if you're looking for something more challenging that's working to utilize the full kit presented to you when it comes to combat and stealth, I think, yeah, just crank up the difficulty and see how creative you can get with the problem solving they present you with. That ultimately is why I was able to play the game through without any breaks, even with it being as long as it was, if you combine the DLC with the base game. Because, yeah, like, just vary your stuff up, and each enemy has a counter. They make a very conscientious effort to make sure that there is a direct response, there is a thing you can do. You will learn the mechanisms at play here and how to use them to your advantage. And in that way, it did remind me a bit of a FromSoft game, just in the fact that you're here, there's going to be a shit ton of combat. The enemies might seem insane if you're playing at the highest difficulty, but there's a method and rhyme that you learn with time.
Okay, very nice there. So it at the game at its hardest difficulty. I mean, is it still very? Is it so extremely challenging there? You think that maybe normal people that they can't try that, or do you think it's pretty
I would say it's
sweet?
actually approachable, even
Okay.
at its highest difficulty.
Just
It's
requires patience and like willingness to kind of engage with each of the systems instead of just going like, all right, I got my thing, my basic sword, I'm just gonna go attack everybody with that.
they
Okay.
do, like, the highest difficulty does force you to engage more with the stealth mechanic, because you can't just take on an entire camp of enemies. You could. It is
If you're
just,
really good at it, you can.
if you're really good at it and you've got all the timing down, go for it. But if you stealth a little bit, uh, and make use of the lesser known systems, like archery, because that one is another one that's really easy to forget that you can just whip out and use in the middle of a melee skirmish.
Mm. And how big is this game? It's an open world game. What about the main story? How long did it take you guys to complete the main story? And then did you also try to 100% it? Did you 100% it?
I
Yeah.
did I did everything that was possible to do. I think for so just the main story, I believe it took me about 30 hours, maybe 26, 27, maybe a few less than that. The 100%, it was something like 60, 70 hours.
Okay. All right. The same kind of time for you, Tim. That's pretty much
Yeah,
average.
I wrapped it up around 65, 68 hours. And of course, I've added more after the fact, because it is a game that is really nice to revisit just for the visual and acoustic aesthetic. But the main story only took me like a good 30 hours to beat. It was not even half the total play time for this game.
And this game is something I point to when I talk about how I have open world fatigue in kind of the current games industry, and how so many, Assassin's Creed is a great example, Far Cry, a lot of Ubisoft stuff, but it's certainly not the only ones either. But a lot of open world games have this very repetitive game design. You're doing a lot of the same things over and over again, and it wants you to do it for 200, 300 hours, and it's just so much time to sink in, especially when it feels as repetitive as it does. But this, I think, is so much more reasonable of a amount of time to spend. 30 hours, that to me, that's like perfect for an open world story. And then if there's more stuff there, if you really want to do everything, which I did, but if you want to get your story and get out, 30 hours, I feel like, is not bad at all for something that's open world. And then there's more if you want. But it's just to compare it to some of these other ones, that we have lately, that that take, you're going to spend 100 hours on this, and you're going to be doing 10 things for 10 hours a piece. It just, to me, it kind of shows up all that rest of the genre, and just really, it makes it easier to articulate what I think is wrong with other open world games.
And the side missions and everything like that's pretty interesting, pretty engaging.
There's a few different types too. So like, you have one type of side mission that is like very narrative heavy. These side missions are attached to big NPCs that have names and their own subplots. Those are, I think, are fantastic, really, really great. Then you have another type of side mission that are these sort of mythical reinterpretations of things that are happening in the game, and those are very cool. It's another kind of whole separate subcategory there, because the main game, nothing supernatural in it. It's pretty grounded in the real world. But then those missions are sort of an excuse to have some mythological elements crop up every now and then and have them not exactly count in the main narrative. And then you've got beyond that, you've got your somewhat of your collectibles that you might have in a typical open world game. But what I think makes them a lot more fun to actually engage with here is every one of these collectibles, and a lot of them are specifically not even tied to Japanese culture, but to Mongolian culture, because a lot of them you're finding in like enemy encampments and stuff. All of them have a not too long, but decently little nice readable sort of explanation of what they are. And I'm someone that I find Mongolian history particularly interesting, as like ancient history. And so for me, at least, getting to just see all that stuff in the game, it felt like a Mongolian natural history museum exhibit in part, because there is a lot of this very authentic sort of, oh, here's this tool, here's this piece of clothing, here's this dishware. It's a lot of, and maybe not everybody's going to be as into that as I was, but I found the small stuff like that is very much part of the real culture, just absolutely gratifying to run around and get every single one of them.
Okay.
It does very much so feel like you're in a museum at certain parts, like picking up a certain ceremonial headpiece and getting the little history behind it. That is exactly the kind of shit I would be doing at the local history museum. And that they bring that in such a grounded way, integrate it with the game, and bring it to such a larger audience that, again, has been genuinely underserved in this kind of game. I thought it was a genius move. And from what I've heard, they've really carried that with Yote as well.
And it's the kind of thing I think is great to see a video game do in general. And it's not the only one too. Like, I mean, some of the better Assassin's Creed games do also do this, although we're going back a number of years to talk about this. But, sometimes you hear stories about kids like, they don't read as much anymore, or they're not as interested in going to, they want to look at screens all day. But if you can then find a way to inject some of that educational, some of that actual real world knowledge into something that that maybe younger people are interested in spending their time with, you can trick them into learning.
Okay. Very cool there. Did this pop up in the game at all?
Get on my shitty wall! You hear me? Yeah.
No, nothing like that happened at all.
Nothing quite like that.
Okay.
Maybe a DLC.
Those goddamn Mongolians were destroying lots of walls just as parts of structures.
That's true.
Okay. Yeah. And so with this game here, it's sold incredibly well there. It says so far, by September 2024, it says sold over 13 million units. The year it came out. It was nominated for several in awards, including Game of the Year at the Game Awards there. So it was highly anticipated there. And people complained with the sequel, Ghost of Yote, that they want to see more of Jin's character. Do you think Jin's character? Do you want to see more of his character? Or you think it's fully wrapped up here?
I honestly think it is fully wrapped up. At the end of the game, that core narrative that they're telling, I didn't feel like there was anything left unexplored. And even in real life, I mean, because there's two Mongol invasions of Japan that happened, and they're quite far apart. So, if they were to do a time jump and then try and like set a sequel during the second Mongol invasion of Japan, I feel like the character would be too old for it to be like a fun game. You'd start to have like, Harrison Ford and Dial of Destiny, sort of like this character's too old for this to make sense or be fun in the same way. So, and like I said, I think the themes are very, very well wrapped up at the end. I think they make the point they're trying to make. The narrative peaks and it ends, and I don't think there's a need to really revisit that. And I think the fact that Yote is such a large, and again, I haven't gotten to play it yet. I'm very excited to, but I think that it's set so far in the future with a different character, and it's just exploring a different era of Japanese history. I think that's the best choice that you could have made, honestly.
Mm. Tim, do you think that the uh, Ghost of Tsushima one of the best games of the PS4 era? There, I know it came at the tail end, but do you think it's like maybe one of the best, or top 10, top 5 best PlayStation
I
4
would say
games?
it's at the very least in the top 10. I will say it wholeheartedly depends on what you prefer in a game. Like if you subsist solely off of Madden games, you're not going to be swayed. But
You're a
if
big
you
Fortnite
are a
guy.
fan of open world games with heavy historical context, games that have a nice focus on artistic appreciation and cultural appreciation, I think this has got to be a game that you play at some point. And it utilizes the PlayStation 4's hardware in such an excellent way that playing it on a PlayStation 5, I'm like, yeah, I could be convinced that that was from this generation, that I had been playing a remaster or something. Um, so I generally think it is a game that if you're looking at PlayStation 4, that has to be counted in one of the landmark games that you think of the PlayStation 4 and you think of that game.
I know I definitely do, and for the year it came out, I like The Last of Us too. I know it's a divisive game, and there's a lot of people that weren't big fans of it for both legit and not legit reasons that people give. And I still really liked it, but that one game of the year that year, and I think this deserved it over that personally.
Mm. Let me see what other. Do you remember what other games were nominated that year? I can take a look here.
I'd have to look them up too. I don't remember off the top of my head. I just know Last of Us 2 won, and even though I think it's a good game, I really do. I did think this was better.
Okay, very nice there. While I'm looking that up there, if you guys want to give your final thoughts, rating there for Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah, and I saved my one sort of criticism of the game for the end, and I'm not going to let this necessarily affect the rating I give because it was a bonus that was added for free like a year after the game came out. So I don't think it's even necessarily fair to rate it based on this. But after having given the multiplayer a good chunk of time and explored like what it is, I do think it's kind of half-assed and pretty simplistic and basic. I don't think there's all that much to it. A fun time for sure, especially if you have someone to play it with that you just have fun playing games with, like me and Tim did. We did a whole stream of all the or at least all of the 2-player kind of story-led multiplayer missions. There's also 4-player multiplayer, which is a little more like no story at all and just doing like you know little like mission markers on a big map. And I played some of that back when the multiplayer first launched as well. And it's kind of the same thing. I just feel like it's a little basic and it's like repurposed and sort of asset reuse, which again, not a bad thing to reuse assets either. In fact, sometimes it would be better if game studios did that to keep budgets down. But that being said, it's just not adding all that much to the experience, I don't think. And there might be people who are big fans of it. You know, maybe it worked for some people better than me. But I would say that to me is the weakest aspect of the whole experience. But again, it was a free update way after the game came out. I'm rating the game based on its single player mode. I'm giving it a This Is Cinema based on that.
Okay. What about you, Tim?
Um, I I was gonna say I think that this is peak for me. I think that this is a game that really does hold on on its own years after the fact in a way that I wasn't fully anticipating. Like, yeah, we've gotten juggernauts like Elden Ring, and well, I think this game it still has name power. If you say Ghost of Tsushima, people are going to remember it. They're going to know quality that something is being compared to. And ultimately, I think it is a game that really deserves, like I said, a playthrough from anybody that wants a good 30-hour game to play through, because you're going to end up with a experience that I believe to be rather unique, even, even if you don't play the full game. I think this is a game that really deserves a playthrough from anybody that wants a good 30-hour game to play through, because you're going to end up with a experience that I believe to be rather unique, even, even if you don't play the full game. I think this is a game that really deserves a playthrough from anybody that wants a good 30-hour game to play through, because you're going to end up with a experience that I believe to be rather unique, even, even in the aftermath of the gaming landscape, partially created by this game's success. And I guess maybe that's one thing you look for if you want to look for a hallmark of success for this game, is think about how many games can attribute their drive, their ambition, in part to the success that this game has shown the player base will respond to those things with. So yeah, at that, I can't really give it anything else other.
And I'll say, Neil's got me even more excited to play Ghost of Yote, because if he says it's even better than Ghost of Tsushima, then, I mean, to me, that just sounds like crack that I can't wait to, just get into a whole bag of it.
Okay. Interesting there. So Game Awards there. So your Game of the Year. So yeah, last year was Part 2 won. So this year you also had Animal Crossing New Horizons. You had Doom Eternal. You had Final Fantasy VII Remake. And then you had Ghost of Tsushima, and then you also had Hades. More Game of the Year.
That's quite a few good things. Hades, I think Hades actually might be what I would have given it to overall, but Ghost of Tsushima over The Last of Us 2, I think, for sure.
Ghost of Tsushima ended up winning Best Art Direction. It won that at the Game Awards there. And looks like I'm looking to see if it won anything else in the other categories it won. It seems like player voice as well. Ghost of Tsushima also won that one as well. It seems like that was the 2 awards that it won. So you had that. Very cool there. So Sage gives it a this is cinema for Ghost of Tsushima, and Tim gives it a peak.